Hello everyone, you are watching What is an Atheist and an Agnostic? In this video we will talk about the most accurate definitions for the words atheist and agnostic. Besides the most accurate definitions for the words, I also want to explain different views people may have about those words. Not only is it important to know what a word really means so we can use it correctly, we should also know how other people might understand the word. This will help us avoid the frustration that miscommunication can cause. Greek definitions. Our understanding of the words atheist and agnostic stem from the meaning of two or three Greek words, theos, atheos, and agnostos. Theos, a noun meaning God, a god. Atheos, an adjective meaning godless, or without God, knowing and worshipping no God. Agnostos, an adjective meaning unknown. These three words are where our English, theist, atheist, and agnostic come from. Though English words can sometimes seem to take on a life of their own, it's generally helpful to know where they came from and what the original meaning was. Views on the word atheist. I know of three modern views on the word atheist. An atheist is someone who believes there is no God. An atheist is someone who has a lack of faith in God. An atheist is someone who knows that God doesn't exist. In reality, the first two views are the same. The difference is in the emphasis. Because of this, let's look at the first two views for now. Someone who believes God doesn't exist. Someone who lacks faith in God's existence. The difference between these two views is connected to people's conceptions of faith. So let's clear out some misconceptions about faith. What is faith? You may have heard that faith is a religious word, but is it really? If we look in our dictionaries, we will see that faith comes from the Latin fides, which means trust or faith, and fidere, which means to trust or have faith. So, faith seems to have had a very common, not just religious, use throughout history. Though it is true that today you won't hear the word faith outside of religious circles very much, it's probably because faith has mostly been replaced by trust in today's common English. The truth is that today faith can have some religious connotations, but still isn't strictly a religious word. Faith and trust are synonyms, with varying degrees of meaning. Just look in your thesaurus. Even today, we can still see the original meaning of faith in the word faithful. You may have heard that faith is trust without proof, but what about evidence? Romans chapter 8 verses 24 and 25 says in the ASV, "For in hope were we saved, but hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopeth for that which he seeth? But if we hope for that which we see not, then do we with patience wait for it." This seems to agree with Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1, which says, "Now faith is assurance of things hoped for, a conviction of things not seen." However, Hebrews chapter 11 verse 13 says, "These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth." Notice that Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 says faith is a conviction of things not seen. Yet verse 13 in the same chapter says, "These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them and greeted them from afar." So, while faith is trust without proof, trust in things not seen, it is not trust without any evidence, trust without seeing things from afar. In fact, I can think of no one in the Bible who had faith without any kind of evidence. Jesus didn't simply claim to be the Son of God. he performed miracles and fulfilled prophecies. When God called a prophet to do something, they did it because of the evidence they had seen of his power and existence, and because they had seen evidence of his calling them to do it. Even Scripture itself is evidence, being an account of actual people in physical, observable history. For example, see 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 14 through 16. I would argue that there is no such thing as faith without some form of evidence. You may have heard that we can just have faith, but can we? Can we have faith without having faith in something or someone? The answer is no. If this were true, then what would be the difference between having faith and having faith in someone or having faith in God? We can't have sight without seeing something, or have hope without having hope for or in something. And so in the same way, we can't just have faith without having that faith in something. You may have heard that some people have faith and others don't, but is this true? Is there someone who has lived and had no faith? Putting it a different way, has anyone ever lived who had absolutely no trust in anything? It seems like a silly idea when you really think about it, doesn't it? Everyone trusts something to some degree, even if only their own existence. So how can anyone claim they have no faith at all? Instead of thinking in terms of faith or no faith, which is inaccurate, let's think in terms of different degrees of faith in opposite ideas, or different degrees of positive and negative faith in one idea. Let me explain. Imagine there's a line which represents uncertainty. Let's say this line is divided in the middle with another line we can call ignorance. The top half of uncertainty represents more positive, though still uncertain, faith, and the bottom of uncertainty represents more negative, though still uncertain, faith. In this representation, there are two opposing directions away from ignorance, up and down. If complete ignorance on a topic is a complete lack of faith concerning that topic, whatever it is, the further we get from ignorance, no matter which direction we take, the more faith we have. So now let's see how this relates to our topic. A theist may say, "I do not believe God does not exist." This statement shows some faith in God's existence, but a way to stress the faith more would be to say, "I believe God exists." This is also true on the opposite side of the spectrum. To say, "I don't know if God exists," would put you somewhere on the line of uncertainty, but most likely you still have some degree of faith, one way or the other. Essentially then, the difference between a theist and an atheist is not a presence of faith and a lack of faith, but either a presence of faith in two opposing ideas, or a positive and a negative faith in one idea. We could think of it both ways. So, a lack of faith in God is not a complete lack of faith itself, because to lack faith in God's existence is to have faith in God's non-existence. So now we see that to lack faith in God and to believe that God doesn't exist is essentially the same thing, though the emphasis of those two ideas is different. This merges the first two views of an atheist into one view, which leaves us with two modern views of an atheist. Let's proceed with our examination of the word atheist. Someone who knows God doesn't exist. The idea that an atheist is someone who knows that God doesn't exist comes from the literal meaning behind agnostic. We already know that the word agnostic comes from a Greek adjective that means unknown. If we apply this idea of knowledge to the words theist and atheist, a theist could then be someone who knows God exists, and an atheist could be someone who knows God doesn't exist. The main problem with this definition is this. The word that atheist comes from was specifically defined in Greek for this topic. It meant godless. But the word that agnostic comes from had nothing particularly to do with whether any God exists or not. It was very general, used for anything unknown. It then makes more sense to draw the definition of a general adjective, agnostic, from the definition of a specific adjective, atheist, when the general adjective is used in the same topic as the specific adjective usually is. So then, to derive the meaning of atheist from the meaning of agnostic could easily be considered working backwards. Final note on atheist. Because the Greek word atheos was an adjective and our English word is a noun, it's clear that the word has been changed, though the meaning is still very similar. This is important to keep in mind. Views on the word agnostic. I know of two modern views on the word agnostic. An agnostic is someone who doesn't know if a God exists. An agnostic is someone who believes no one can know if a God exists. The term agnostic was coined in 1892 by Thomas Henry Huxley. Officially, according to the dictionaries, the word is a designation for someone who believes that we can't know what the origin of everything is, whether everything's origin was God or some other godlike force. This clears the first view of the word agnostic off the table for us. But let's look further into the word and examine where the confusion about agnostic comes from. Examination of misconceptions. As we've already covered, agnostic comes from a Greek word that means unknown. We can see how people could become confused when we carefully consider the following questions. If atheist is used for someone who doesn't believe in God, is an agnostic someone who doesn't know if God exists? If agnostos means unknown, is an agnostic someone who isn't well known? The first question represents what seems to be the most common misconception of the word agnostic, and, though some may disagree, is a legitimate question. Let's remember that the Greek adjective behind atheist was used specifically to describe someone who didn't have a god of their own, but the Greek adjective behind agnostic was used very generally. With this in mind, it seems very natural to think of the word agnostic as being influenced by the word atheist, because it's as if agnostic is being placed into the realm of atheist, just like the word theist is. The second question illustrates another view someone can take when examining the root of the word. Let's realize that because the word has been changed, being changed from an adjective into a noun, and being given a new shade of meaning in English, the word doesn't need to mean exactly the same thing as its predecessor. It might seem like a strange use of the original Greek word, but it's a legitimate change. Final note on agnostic. So, how do we remember what an agnostic is? Try to remember it this way. An agnostic is someone who believes the origin of everything is unknown and unknowable. Summary. Atheist. The word atheist comes from a Greek word meaning godless. The most accurate definition for the word atheist is someone who believes God doesn't exist, or who doesn't believe God exists. Both of these are the same things, the only difference being the amount of faith expressed in the statement. Agnostic. The word agnostic comes from a Greek word meaning unknown. An agnostic is someone who believes the origin of everything is unknown and unknowable.